Hey everyone, I'm back. It's day 8 of my 10-day challenge. I have a special guest in the background, you might notice. um, I have challenged myself. Bye. Okay, she wanted to come on, I guess, and say hello to Facebook. She's gone now. So anyway, I challenged myself to go live each day for 10 days because I have been reflecting on what I've learned so far hosting the podcast. That's the Widowed Parent podcast. And I put together a document with 10 things that I've learned. And so I've been coming on once a day to chat a little bit about each one. So today is day 8. I can't believe that 10 days are almost over. But today I wanted to talk about some of the things that I learned from Pease from Kate's Club. And I tell you, I just had the best discussion with Lane. And Kate's Club is in Atlanta, and it's a children's grief center. And they have really fabulous programming. I was really impressed with what they're doing. So if you happen to be in Atlanta or know somebody in Atlanta, I would recommend checking them out for sure. So yesterday when I came on live, I was talking about post-traumatic growth. And today I wanted to talk about traumatic grief, which is another kind of element of this whole trauma situation. And so I talked with Lane for episode 11, by the way, in case you want to listen to the whole discussion and hear what she had to say about it. But what I learned from her is that traumatic grief is actually a little bit different from, I call it regular grief. I'm sure that's not the right word. Oh, hi Lane. Thanks for joining. Good to see you here. I'm sure regular grief isn't the right word. I think she used the word adaptive grief. But anyway, traumatic grief is a type of reaction where you might have some trauma symptoms, anxiety, maybe PTSD things, maybe you can't look at the pictures of the person that you lost without having a kind of a panicked reaction. And the point is that these trauma reactions actually interfere with the necessary tasks of grieving, kind of the adaptive grief process, which is kind of what we're hoping to engage in the adaptive grief process. And if you have these trauma symptoms, it interferes with that. So I thought that was really interesting and worth thinking about, and maybe worth looking into a little more for some people or for their kids. And the other thing that Lane mentioned when we talked, which I thought was really interesting, apparently there's some new research about the likelihood of traumatic grief, or when that might be triggered in certain people. And she said, I hope I get this right, that number one trigger would be cases of homicide or suicide is most likely to cause a traumatic grief response in both adults and children. But after that, this was the really interesting part, that adults are more likely to have a traumatic grief response after some kind of sudden passing of a loved one, like a car crash, a sudden cardiac incident, and some kind of sudden and surprise death is more likely to cause traumatic grief reaction in adults. But for children, it's just the opposite, that actually if a parent dies by a lengthy illness, that's more likely in children to trigger a traumatic grief response. And I'm not sure it's completely understood exactly what goes into all that, but it sounds like maybe some of the things that that they're looking at is like if a parent is ill for quite a while, there might be quite a lot of disruption to the child's life. In addition to the death itself, you have the period leading up to it, where the parents might have to travel for treatment. They might be taken care of by grandparents, neighbors, other relatives or friends. That disrupts the child's life. There's lots and lots of things going on that actually potentially make that more likely to trigger trauma in children than in adults. And also there's an interesting concept called, it's on the tip of my tongue, anticipatory grief. The idea that, if somebody has a terminal illness, that adults oftentimes will start grieving that loss, at the beginning when they get the news that it's terminal, and can grieve a bit along the way, and that is maybe children don't quite have that anticipatory grief capability or experience. So I thought a lot of really interesting things there. I'm going to read up on it some more. I have a really interesting book about traumatic grief, and I was going to show you guys it here, but I couldn't find it right before I hopped on. But I will share that later after I read a little bit more of it. And I would encourage you to listen. It's episode 11 when I talked with Lane Pease from Kate's Club. I'll put the link in the comments here, but it's widowedparentpodcast.com, and then you can find episode 11. And we had a really interesting discussion. I was looking at my notes here. We talked about like when you might choose one-on-one therapy versus a peer grief group for your child, when one or the other of those might be more appropriate. We talked about the importance of open and honest communication with your child, especially, regarding the cause of death. If it was a difficult situation, how important it is to be honest. We talked about Kate's Club's programs, which, by the way, sound fantastic. And if I lived in Atlanta, I would definitely be getting signed up for that. I don't live in Atlanta, but if you do, I'd encourage you to check it out. We talked about Worden's Tasks of Mourning. I think she might be the first person that I heard about this from, and so actually a book just arrived from Amazon for me yesterday, so I can read up on that a little bit more, and I'll look forward to telling you guys what I learned more about that. But basically, it's not the old, you might have heard of the 5 stages of grief, which actually more recently people have realized that was kind of applied wrong, that Kubler-Ross, who came up with that, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, meant for that to be applied to terminally ill patients facing their own impending mortality and their own processing of their own situation. And it has later erroneously been applied to people grieving the loss of loved ones. And psychologists and people have decided recently that actually is not a very good model when it applies to grieving the loss of a loved one. So this guy, William Worden, has done a bunch of writing on what he calls the 4 tasks of mourning. And tasks meaning they're not sequential. You might be all over the map, but kind of 4 essential components to integrate. I can't speak more about that yet. Like I said, I'm going to read up on that some more. So I'll look forward to bringing that to you another time. But I did just want to jump on here and tell you a little bit about my discussion with Lane from Kate's Club, because we had just such a good discussion. Oh, hi, Christy. I think you might have just jumped on here. Good to see you. And I just learned a lot from her and from that discussion. A lot of really practical and interesting and informative information. And Lane, by the way, is also a widowed parent herself. So she shared some of her story as well. So anyway, I think that's all. I did put together a document, guide, for lack of a better word. I sat down and I thought about some of the really top things that I've taken away from all my guests so far. And I kind of sat down and I thought of, what has really stuck with me? What are some of the main takeaways that I drew out of this? Pardon me. And I put it into a PDF so that you guys can download it, print it. Excuse me. I hope it's helpful to you. It was helpful to me, to the process of sitting down. I've got hours and hours and hours of interviews now and transcripts, and it's a lot of content. And so to sit down and kind of really pull out, I think, some of the key points I thought was helpful, and I hope you'll find it helpful too. And if I could ask a small favor, if you happen to know somebody who's a widowed parent who you think might be interested or find helpful this information, if you would just send them the link, I hope they'll find it interesting too. It's jennylisk.com/top10. And you can download the document. It's free, super easy PDF, so you can print it. But I really would like to try to reach as many widowed parents as I can, because I think, this, as you guys know, this is it's a hard job. And I think, with the different people that I've talked to and bringing you all the information I can find, hopefully, that'll give you some tips and some advice that might make it just a little more doable. So anyway, I think that's all, and I will talk to you tomorrow. Tomorrow is day 9, and tomorrow I'm bringing you something else that I learned from talking with Pease from Kate's Club. So, as I said, I learned a lot from her, so I will wait until tomorrow to share on that one, and I hope I will see you there. Okay, have a good night. Bye.